Kick, welcome, well, in YouTube when you watch later, welcome to episode 3 of Got Your Trade, the show, the podcast where we talk sports, we talk stocks, we talk gaming. And today, it's going to be heavily focused on the NBA, Summer League specifically, and then also free agency. And then a little later on, uh, my boy here, my best friend Vincent, Rocky B Trades on Twitter. Give him a follow. He's going to be diving into one of his top stock plays from this past week, as well as some of the stuff that he is looking forward to, both for trading, for long term investing, and all that. But it's been a couple weeks. I will say it's been a couple weeks since our last show. Sometimes our schedules get a little busy, but we're trying to be consistent with this, so bear with us on that. But first and foremost, Vincent, obviously with the NBA Summer League, there's three names, well, really one name, but we're going to say three for this case. Three names that most people are going to be paying attention to, and that's the first, second, and third overall pick. So Victor Wembanyama of the Spurs, Brandon Miller of the Hornets, and was it Scoot Henderson of the Portland Trailblazers? Yeah. So I want to go ahead and we'll just go in order, really, and we'll start with Wembanyama. I believe he only has the one game under his belt so far that the Spurs played against the Hornets. So you had a pick 1 versus pick 2 kind of matchup there. Friday night, 9 p.m. Kind of like it was probably one of the most hyped summer league games of all time. At least from what I've been watching. But starting with Victor Wembanyama, what did you think of his performance? Obviously, it wasn't what people expected from a scoring standpoint. I think he was like 2 for 13 from the field.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, tell me what you thought about that.
Yeah, well,
what's up, Arctic? Welcome to the show.
Oh, what's going on, Arctic? But, obviously, there's a lot of nerves and a lot of hype for all these top prospects. And, Wembanyama definitely has that potential, when they say he's one of the greatest prospects ever. It's true. Just because of his height, his length, his unusual. This guy's one of the first highlight I ever watched of this guy is where he shot a 3, missed it, and then put back dunk like from his own rebound. Like that's crazy. But in terms of his performance, obviously pretty disappointing. They did win, but it was versus the Hornets, and the Hornets have probably the worst summer league roster right now. Yeah. But he did have 5 blocks, so that's pretty good. I think his defense is gonna come pretty, be pretty useful, I guess. He kind of reminds me of like a Porzingis, really long, tall, moves pretty good laterally. It's just more of an effort thing, and with the tools that he has, Rudy Gobert is also like his mentor, being from France. I think that'll really help him. I think, he probably, they probably got to work on like offense and just getting him better looks. But it's going to be exciting to see like his future because the NBA's got plenty of talent right now. Definitely from the Europeans, and he's on the top of that list. So, going to be exciting to see what his future holds.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people need to understand that the reason why there's so much hype about where he went with the Spurs is he's going to get developed by Greg Popovich, who has developed David Robinson. He's developed Tim Duncan, and now he's got this big guy to work with, who is a completely different player from the other two mentioned. And obviously it's a completely different game now from what was being played back then. But I think one thing people need to take into consideration with that initial performance is he probably has had no time or very little time spent with the actual coaching staff, the actual roster. So I would say that his performance from an offensive standpoint was clearly they just put him out there and were like, do whatever. And he's playing with a bunch of people he's never played with, a lot of which aren't going to be in the league, or at least contribute in the league at a consistent rate. And so I think what we got, and what I will say is I liked his response to how he played. Like he straight up was like, I really didn't know what I was doing out there when they asked him about his performance. And the fact that he still put up like, I think he had like 9 points, 8 rebounds,
Hmm.
and 5 block. The 5 blocks part is super impressive
Yeah, I mean
because
that's impressive for anybody.
I mean it just goes to show that not only is this a star, or as we expect, a star that's going to be lighting it up on offense, but this is going to be a defensive threat too, and showing that he can hold his own on that end. He moves around the court well for a guy his size, probably the best we've seen. Um, and so I think, first game, there's the jitters. He's, let's be honest, he's new to America. He's from
Yeah.
France. There's so much hype surrounding him, so much media attention, and he hasn't even gotten his feet wet with the actual team, the actual coaching staff. I think we might see more performances like we did that initial game, but personally for me, I'm not concerned. I think come regular season, it's almost gonna look like a different player in the sense of how comfortable he is and how he works with his teammates. So before we move on to the next guy, I mean, do you agree with that? Like, do you think he's at this point just kind of a raw project or a raw talent, if you will, and it's just going to take some time to develop him to the NBA game versus just professional basketball overseas?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's probably going to take him some time to develop. Like you said, I mean, he's got all the hype in the world. I mean, they're calling him the greatest prospect. I think even a greater prospect, better than LeBron, which, that's for another argument. But he's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders right now, obviously. So it's pretty hard to judge right away. But, just give him some time. And I think, for the NBA season, he'll be ready. I know he'll definitely contribute on the defensive end. I mean, 5 blocks for anybody in any league, any game. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal because he's got that athleticism. He moves well, and his height and reach. The offensive game, he might have to take time to develop. He does have a nice looking jump shot. Obviously, he's got to work on the efficiency, but I think like. When he's playing with the NBA guys all summer long and mini camp and stuff like that, then you'll really see what he's capable of. Obviously, they'll be running like plays and things like that. The summer league right now, it's a lot of guys where you have the draft picks, obviously. Those guys are going to make the team. The first rounders, no matter what, are going to make the team. But then you have a lot of just grinders, like people really trying to make it. And it's kind of just like this cluster of young talent. I mean, even you do have some like mid 20-year-olds or higher 20-year-olds from like the G League and stuff, um, playing really good defense. And, it's just going to take him some time to get his feet wet. But I think the future's bright. The Spurs, they got a good one. I'm jealous the Hornets didn't get him. But he's got all the potential in the world to be one of the greatest.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I mean, I think you made a very valid point there with the whole, with the different types of people you have out there in the summer league. It's the first round picks. It's all rookies. It's guys that have been in the G League for a few years. People that went even undrafted, and these are dudes that are like, it's no joke. Like, yes, it's exhibition matches, but they're trying to earn themselves a spot to training camp. At least a good majority of the people that are playing in this, and so they're not gonna go easy. They're gonna see a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who, like you said, people are arguing might be the best prospect we've seen since LeBron James, and they're gonna play their ass off. I mean, like, that's an opportunity for them to make a name. Like, I shut down Victor Wembanyama on defense,
Yeah.
or like Kai Jones for the Hornets. He had that
Oh, yeah.
highlight play where he dunked on him. I mean, does it really mean anything? Probably not. Is
Oh,
he going to
no.
do that in a regular season game? I doubt it. But
Mm-mm.
in this case, it's an opportunity for a guy that I want to say he's in his second season, third season now, and
Yep.
he hasn't really made too much of an impact with the Hornets. But maybe this is a turning point for him. He dunked on the top prospect. Maybe he's got some confidence in himself, or at least more confidence, and you see where it goes. But speaking of the Hornets, we'll move on to the number 2 overall pick, Brandon Miller from Alabama. Um, Obviously came into the league with all that like controversy. We won't get into that, but He was a questionable pick because a lot of people were like, do they really risk it with another guy who has off the court issues, or should
Right.
they just go ahead and take Scoot Henderson? But with that, it was you already had LaMelo Ball, and then they go when we talk about free agency later. You went and got the max deal with the Hornets for 5 years, so they
Yep.
felt they needed to add wing depth or wing talent, which I agree is a big area of weakness for them.
Agreed.
But you know, I want you to start us off talking about his performances. I want to say he's only played in 2 games now in the summer
Yeah.
league, and it has been interesting. I will lead off with that, and I'll let you dive into that a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Well, Brandon Miller, I've heard of him a little bit. I watched some of his highlights. I will say the one game I would say from his college career that really stood out was this man dropped like 41 versus South Carolina and on the road when they were chanting like all this noise against him, obviously with the controversy off the court. But outside of that, I mean, as a prospect, he does look like he has the tools to be a good player. I mean, the guy's like 6'9", 6'10". He compares his game to Paul George. He can shoot threes. He's lanky. And I do agree that it was probably, Scoot probably has more raw talent. There's no doubt. But Miller has the frame. And the thing is with the Hornets is you have a couple things. You got Gordon Hayward, who has one more year left on his contract. He's an aging player. If he does return, he's definitely not getting another max. He's way too injury prone. Then you have Miles Bridges coming back from his situation. He was a great player, ascending, but, obviously the off the court issues were, kind of distracted the team and took his playing,
Took a
a
whole year
year
from his.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like he fumbled the bag really. But anyway, so Brandon Miller he comes in. I watched the first game he played. He was pretty bad. I think he was like 1 for 7 or 8 in the first half. It was awful. And then like I think he finished the game with like 15 or 17, just like garbage points because they still got blown out by like 20 or 30. He does foul a lot. It seems like because I guess in summer league you can get up to 10 fouls, which is I didn't know. But this dude was getting like 6 fouls in the first half. And I was like, he already fouled out, and I guess not because you can still play. Um, but it seems like he definitely has some developing to do. I thought as like a Hornets fan, we're from familiar with the Charlotte area. We were
Right.
thinking this guy's gonna start right away, but I don't think so. I think he's gonna need some more development. Learn from the other veteran wings like Hayward and Bridges and the Martin brother, and maybe develop as a player. But he's got potential if he can just keep working and just hopefully MJ's last pick ever is not a bust, but it's MJ. The only good pick I can think of is
Kemba.
Lamelo and the
Or wait, he
recent
didn't take
and
Kemba.
Kemba.
Or
Or
did
oh,
he?
he didn't. I don't know, but
I
I
don't know.
mean it's
I don't
Kemba
know
and
if he was the.
Lamelo.
I was gonna say I don't know if he was majority owner when they took Kemba, but Lamelo, yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
So we'll see. I mean, what are your thoughts on Brandon Miller, the future of the Hornets, and yeah, because the
I
summer league they've
mean,
been awful. They've been awful, both
yeah,
teams.
it's again with everything with the summer league. Obviously, the players that probably aren't going to be making it to an NBA roster, or at best are only going to make it to training camp, are going to be playing a lot harder than the kind of guys like this, where they know they're going to be on the roster. They know they're probably going to end up starting at some point uh, in this season. So you have that. So but I just think with Brandon Miller, right, the bad offense, the not great shooting numbers and stuff like that, that doesn't concern me too much. I mean, because again, I'm not gonna even if a guy drops a 30 bomb, 40 bomb in summer league, like I'm not gonna be too impressed because I'm gonna be like, look at who you're going against. Like you were the best college basketball player or second best or you know he was up there as one of the top college basketball players this past year at Alabama.
He
Um,
was.
and so it's like you're going against guys that most casual NBA fans probably have never even heard of. Um,
Right,
and
right.
so it's like if you drop a big game, like unless you're making good plays, you're making good cuts, you're getting your own shot off of going off a screen, like doing the fundamental stuff, then it's impressive. But like other than that, it's not a big deal. I think the fouling situation shows he clearly is behind in terms of being ready to play defense in the
Yeah,
NBA. Like you said, obviously there's the fouling out. Whether it's is it 10 fouls you said?
Yeah,
Because
apparently it's 10.
I could have thought it was just like they had unlimited, honestly, but even
Yeah,
10 is a lot. I mean,
that's a lot.
that's double what he got in
And
college.
the quarters are 10 minutes instead of 12, so it's like less
Right. So it's
time,
less
more fouling.
time and he's
Yeah.
fouling more. I think that is definitely an area for concern, considering the fact that you don't take a guy number 2 overall and just expect him to be like a role player or a uh, guy to kind of go in there and maybe pop off for a little bit, but he gets a couple of fouls and has to come out. Like, you want this guy to be a starter. You want him playing
Mhm.
40, 42 minutes a night or whatever. And maybe he's not going to be there right off the jump. I think people should pump the brakes on their expectations for him early on in the season,
Yeah.
because I think it will be important knowing that Miles Bridges is officially back. He signed that. I think it's like a 1 year deal to
Right.
officially come back. He will be playing this coming season. They'll have Gordon Hayward on his last year of his deal. Um, I want to say PJ Washington is still up in the air. I don't know if he
I
has.
forgot. Yeah, I think he's a
I
free
don't.
agent.
Yeah, I want to say
Or
he's a free agent. I don't know if it's restricted or if he is unrestricted and just hasn't signed anywhere yet. Um, but I know that that's another name that he could definitely look or play behind. And
yeah.
oh wait, hold on, my audio's all messed up. There we go. Sorry,
Oh, no, you're
I
good.
started hearing myself in my own ear. I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, like those are like
No,
the
you're
type of
good.
players he needs to be learning from. I mean, I remember I got to meet PJ Washington the day after he was drafted. I was there when he did his introductory press conference with it was him and Cody Martin. That was the Hornets' 2 picks that year,
Mhm.
and I was there and got to meet them. And I mean, it was just like crazy because it was a guy that was the same age as me, or actually, he was a year younger than me, and he's getting drafted into the friggin' NBA, and I'm like getting ready to go into my junior year of college, like completely different areas of life. But I think that's another thing to take into consideration with these guys, especially Wembenyama, especially Brandon Miller. Like these dudes are kids, and
Yeah,
it's
I
very
mean, they
important.
really are.
It is very important who they surround those guys with because you need them to have everything taken care or everything put together off the court so that they can do their best on the court. And obviously that it's questionable what the Hornets got over there with Miles Bridges and um, stuff like that. But you have other veteran players like Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, who have managed to, when they're healthy, have success and they're not, getting into trouble or getting suspended or anything like that. So I think it's important that Brandon Miller finds a teammate to latch onto. I think it's
Yeah.
important that the Hornets in general make sure he's not ever in positions where he's guarding a top player. And
Mhm.
let's face it, the league is loaded with wing talent.
Oh yeah.
But like for example, if the Hornets have Brandon Miller starting and they're playing a team like the Boston Celtics, I'm wearing a Celtics shirt. They're my favorite team. But anyways, let's say they're playing the Celtics, right? And next year they roll out the lineup. They've got Tatum, they've got
Yeah.
Brown. I would not be putting Brandon Miller on Jason Tatum. The way I'd
Oh,
put it. I
absolutely
would put him
not.
on Jalen Brown because people know that Jalen Brown struggles to go left, so it's an easy thing for him to focus on as a young player. Make this guy go left, and that's how you get him to get a little more confident because people they're trying to. I would say the narrative around Jalen Brown this offseason, especially based on how he played in the Eastern Conference Finals, has taken a little bit of a turn. A lot of people are questioning whether he's really that good. And I think people forget that this dude is averaging like 24 or 25 a night. He's a
Yeah.
good player. He just has an area of weakness. But like getting a guy like Brandon Miller to like guard him and be able to then say that night if they win the game or something like that, like, yo, I actually did pretty good defense on this guy. Like it's a lot of building up his confidence and just getting him used to those types of players that dominate this league. But yeah, I mean, they gotta put him in the right situations to succeed early on because this franchise cannot afford another first round pick that is a bust because I mean, ever since they drafted. Let's go with Kemba Walker back in, I want to say that was 2011 was that draft,
Yeah.
right? They hit the
Yeah.
nail on the head with that one. He was a franchise player for them for a decade or so, maybe a
Mhm.
little less, but he was, their best player, and they never could get any talent around him. But it's because you look at all the drafts they had after that. They had the number 2 overall pick. They take Michael Kidd Gilchrist. They had
Mhm.
the number 5 overall pick. They take Noah Vonleh. They, I mean, I can't even think of any of the other ones that they've made some really bad draft picks.
Just bad decisions.
Lamelo
Yeah.
Ball was a great pick. It was a very easy pick. But
Yeah.
this year, obviously, it wasn't so simple because everyone knew who was going number 1. And then after that, it got a little dicey. I mean, you knew Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson were going to be up there. And then there was those 2 twins that went like 4th and 5th,
Mhm.
like back to back or whatever it was. So, I mean, you knew who was in the top 5, but there's only one player that it feels like a guarantee that he's going to end up being good because he got put, let's face it, he got put in the perfect situation being under Greg Popovich. But yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, Brandon Miller, man, I think it was the right choice for them based on
The team's needs,
their
I guess.
exactly
Yeah.
based on their needs. I think going with a wing was their best option, but I think
He's
everything
got work
else.
to do. He's
He's
got work to
yes,
do
exactly. He's got his
for
work cut out for him.
for sure.
Uh, but I'll be excited to go see him play this year. I know you talked about going
Yeah.
to some games.
Oh heck
I
yeah.
hope everything turns out good for him because I'd like to see another team in Carolina compete,
Do something.
other than
Yeah,
the
just do something.
Hurricanes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Seriously.
I mean, now we can move on. I haven't. I will say I haven't watched as much of him in the summer league. I don't even know. Has Scoot Henderson
Scoot.
played yet?
Yeah, he played one game. I think.
Okay. And
Um.
how does he look? Because I know he's an interesting story too. Because it's like
Yeah.
Wembanyama came from France. Uh, Brandon Miller, the more traditional route, coming from college basketball, and you got
Mhm.
Scoot Henderson, who is coming from the G League. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure Scoot he played in the G League Ignite team, which is like, the alternative instead of going to college to do that. And I saw a summer game and I was just watching like the stats and he dropped 13 in the first quarter and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, this guy's going to drop 40, like that's insane." Now he did just end the game with 15 total points, which is still a great like debut anyways. Or pretty solid. I think he only shot 5 for 13. The only downside with his game I hear is that he can't really shoot. He has a nice mid-range game. He'll hit a 3 every now and then. But he's really explosive. He is like 6'2", and probably going to be a great prospect. It made sense for them to draft him just because um, they probably moved on from Dame, and obviously he's the best player available on the board at that time. And then for the Hornets' sake, yeah, it could have made sense to get him, but also I do like Terry Rozier and LaMelo together, so to have Scoot be a six man, I think he's too talented for that. So I think it made sense for Miller to go to the Hornets and Scoot to go to the Blazers, but we'll see what happens. It should be his team. If and when Dame is gone, assuming he gets traded, which he probably will. So his future is bright, I would say.
yeah, no, for sure. And so I was actually just looking it up, and it's actually kind of crazy. Both, so the game that Scoot played in, it was Trailblazers versus Rockets. So you had the number 3 overall pick going up against, I want to say, is it Amen Thompson or It's not Amen. I want to say it's Amen Thompson, who was the number 4 overall pick. Uh, that was the matchup you had, and they both ended up getting injured in their debuts in the summer league.
Yeah.
Scoot Henderson had a right shoulder injury. Thompson had an ankle injury. I think they said both are going to be fine. Scoot's being held out of his game today. The Portland Trailblazers play a summer league game tonight or today, and he's not playing in it, but he should be fine. But I think, like you said, like his biggest deficiency or weakness as a player right now is his 3 point shot, which for a guy at his position, he doesn't really have a choice. He needs to be able to hit that shot. Wing players can get away with it a little more, but guards really need to be able to hit the threes, especially when you look at all the other top guards in the league. And so it's going to be interesting how he develops, especially considering, like you said, Damian Lillard's more than likely going to force his way out to Miami. And not to mention the return from the Heat isn't going to be as good as it could have been had they been able to trade him elsewhere. But there's talks that he essentially won't play for anyone else, so he's forcing Portland's hand essentially to get him traded, and then it's pretty much from that point on, it's all of a sudden like, all right, it's your team now, kid. So
Yeah,
I will say of the three, he definitely landed in the worst scenario, at least off the rip. But at the same time, it could end up being good for him because obviously he's going to have all eyes on him early on, especially if Dame gets traded. I mean, that hasn't happened yet, but assuming it does, it's going to be his team, and he's going to have to be able to command it early on, and they can get used to the kind of player he is or the kind of player he's going to be, and then it's a little easier to build around him from a talent perspective. So I think it's one of those situations where, like, early on, it's probably the worst situation, but in the long term, it could end up being a very good thing too.
I agree with that. It would definitely be interesting to see, but I guess we can go ahead and transition towards, the NBA offseason with the trades and free agency signings because
Yep.
there's been a lot of exciting ones.
Yeah.
And I guess we can start with, the big one for you, I guess, the Porzingis deal coming to Boston, obviously giving up, you could call him, obviously, he's the heart and soul of the team, right? Marcus Smart, or he was for a long time. What are your thoughts on that trade and how it played out? And how do you see the Porzingis pickup? Overall, it does seem like a good value. I mean, to give up Smart and get 2 picks and Porzingis, it does seem like good value on paper.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important part was right off the bat, they were able to make the trade happen and then extend him. I believe he signed a two
Yeah.
year extension where he'll be making like 30 million per year. So in total, he's at least locked in for 3 years with the Celtics, which, assuming Brown ends up signing the supermax deal and considering the deal that Tatum's currently on, that essentially locks that big three in for 3 more years. Um, I think obviously getting rid of Smart was not Boston's first choice. Obviously, there was a deal in place initially with that involved the Clippers, and it was going to be Malcolm Brogdon being traded. But that ended up falling through at the last second. The Clippers were worried about his wrist injury that he sustained in the playoffs and whether he's going to need surgery, and they were just kind of like, you know what, we're not going to do this. And last second, the Grizzlies kind of stepped in, and it ended up that we had to trade Smart, which, I mean, no Celtics fans happy to see. From, like you said, he's the heart and soul of the team, and I know a lot of NBA, more than other sports, like, you can win with talent alone, but having a guy like that, just, you knew he loved playing for that team, and you knew he was a leader. He had experienced so many different iterations of the team. I mean, when he was drafted, we still had Rajon Rondo, Jeff Green, Brandon Bass. I mean, we still had holdovers from the previous Big Three era. And then he got to experience playing alongside Isaiah Thomas when he was at his peak in 2017. Played
Yeah.
alongside Kyrie Irving, played alongside Kemba Walker, and then finally got the chance to be the starting point guard, which he always believed he could be. And I mean, you know, like I said, I don't think they wanted to get rid of him, but to go ahead and bring in the type of player they did, and considering, I mean, they still have Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon and Peyton Pritchard, uh, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to improve the team. And a guy like Kristaps Porzingis is exactly what they needed because, I mean, they already had a two-headed monster at the big man position. You had Al Horford, who, he's older, but he can still play very good defense. I mean, people underestimate, like, the way he was able to shut down Joel Embiid in those last couple, like Game 6, Game 7 of that Eastern Conference semifinal series. Like, he can really lock in on the defensive end. When he's at his best, his outside shot is what makes him a threat. He's able to set good screens, and then you've of course got Robert Williams, who is a defensive nightmare. He rebounds tenaciously. He's all about the alley oops and stuff like that, high flying. But the problem with both of them was neither of them could really play at the play at the key.
Yeah.
Neither of them could post up really.
Hmm.
And now with Porzingis, you got a guy who I want to say statistically he just led the league in like post ups per game or points off of post ups per game. Some, you know, random stat like that, but one that for the Celtics offense is very important because now it's not just Tatum bringing the ball up and everyone just like running in a circle until someone gets open for a 3-point shot. You can really go inside out, and you actually have a threat for someone to take a post shot. And he's what 7'4", and he's got a good jumper. He had his best offensive season this past year. Granted, it was with Washington, who was, aside from Bradley Beal, that team was a joke. They weren't
Yeah.
competing. But I think it's the perfect player. Their big man rotation is a lot more figured out. Um, Not to mention, I think this finally opens things up for them to not always have to have Tatum and Brown on the court at the same time for the offense to be flowing. Because over the past couple of years, you could tell that with the lack of depth at wing and with the type of players that Horford and Robert Williams III are, when you took Brown or Tatum out, the offense would kind of just go dead because they didn't really have another option to work with, and now they do. Um, and it also shows an immense trust in Derek White to take over the starting point guard spot. He played phenomenally all season and into the playoffs. Um, and so obviously, again, it sucks to lose Smart, but you stockpiled even more draft picks. They technically could go and make more moves because they've got so many different assets like that to work with. But I think overall it was definitely a win for the Celtics, even though you had to get rid of someone who meant so much to the city and the fans. Um,
Definitely.
but it was the right move. But something I actually wanted to bring up with you, we saw a lot of players this offseason lock in to max contract extensions. We have a few that haven't yet, but we
Yeah.
had players like LaMelo Ball, Desmond Bain. I'm trying to think of some others off the top of my head. You might be able to help me out here, but we saw a lot of
Yeah.
people locking into those max deals, and some of them you look at, and it's like, okay, I get it. LaMelo Ball with the Hornets, of course he locked into a max deal.
Yeah.
He's clearly worthy of that deal.
Yeah.
But then you see a guy like Desmond Bain lock in for the Grizzlies to
Hmm.
a max contract, and when Ja Morant is active and not getting in trouble,
Yeah.
what Desmond Bain's the fourth option, fifth option now with Smart being there. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
like, is that really like worth a max contract? Like I just feel like the NBA has really gotten out of hand recently with like the tiers of players and what they get uh, in the off season.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see a lot of these players getting huge extensions, some warranted, some not. LaMelo, obviously, I think he deserves it just because Charlotte's never really going to get a star like him in terms of it's not just his play on the court. I mean, he's obviously very talented, the best ball brother, but he has a big brand. Like he has his own shoe deal. All the little kids love LaMelo. Like I've been watching him since he was in high school. It makes sense. He's got that charisma. And then Desmond Bain, he's actually a really good two-way player. 3 and D. I don't think he's going to average anything more than like 20 a game. Still solid. But it is going to be strange because he is 6'5", a guard, Smart's a guard, Jaw's a guard. So it'll be interesting to see like what that lineup's going to be because you have those three, and then
You
probably
got
starting all of
Jaren
them. And
Jackson.
then
You
Jaren
got
Jackson and like Steven Adams, I think.
yeah, and I think
So
they
it's
got and Brandon Clark's another young player. I think they
yeah,
have
so it's
too. I
like
mean,
it's weird. They have a bunch of guards and then a bunch of big men, but like I don't really see the forwards. So I don't know if that is gonna, how that's gonna play out. But yeah, I mean, apparently I've been just hearing it's just there's like this new like TV deal coming in the coming years or something like that. So all these people are getting crazy amounts of money, even though like Dylan Brooks is getting like 20 million a year. Everybody thought he was going to China.
I was gonna say,
Um,
wait, where did he end
that
up
man's getting
going?
paid. Houston on a
They
4-year,
did.
80
Oh,
something million-dollar contract. And that's another one where I don't understand why they would sign him because they have a bunch of young talent that are going to need the minutes. And Dylan Brooks, I mean, he can play defense, but he talks a lot. He shot like 30%,
I
averaged
was
like
gonna
10 points.
say I
So I
would
don't know
not.
how that man's making 20. Fred VanVleet I also picked up on basically the same contract as Kyrie. And it's like, I mean, no disrespect to VanVleet, he's a champion, but this dude was undrafted, good player, but he's not a star. I mean, he's not Kyrie.
Not
Like,
to mention,
for
we
them.
all know why he's a champion, and it's Kawhi Leonard. Like, let's be
Yeah, they had a
let's be
loaded
honest.
roster. They had a loaded roster. They were good. Nick Nurse was a ascending coach. They had Siakam. He was maybe the third. He was the sixth man. He was like the third or
Right?
fourth
I don't
best player.
even.
They had
They had
Lowry.
Lowry starting. Yeah,
Yeah, they had Lowry in his prime. Pascal, Kawhi, Marcus Gasol.
I
Like
want
they
to say
had
Serge
good.
Ibaka was on that team.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, he was good. For him to get 30 something million, and what's weird is they have Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. They just drafted that Thompson,
Yep.
who's I think a guard slash forward. So it's gonna be weird to see how they fit. And they also have Ime Udoka now, the former Celtic
Yep.
coach. He's a good coach. We'll see if, how that works out. But yeah, just crazy. Everybody in the league is getting a bag. Must be nice, if they
It
can
must be
continue it.
nice.
I don't want to see Gordon Hayward though get another
Oh
max because I don't
Jesus
think this man's
Christ.
worthy of it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. He's got to go to the agent. So,
Yeah, I mean, well,
um,
it's just another thing, like similar to the Dylan Brooks deal that you just brought up. You had
yeah,
Max Strus, who was on the Miami Heat, who kind of got attention because after the Heat knocked out the Celtics in the playoffs, he put that tweet out where it was like, or Instagram post or whatever, where it was like,
yeah,
you let me go or whatever, because he initially signed as an undrafted free agent with Boston, didn't really do anything, and then ended up with the Heat and ended up being a solid role player. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't do shit in the finals. He was terrible, and then the
yep.
Cavaliers go and throw him a 4-year, 84 million deal.
I think it was 64, but still a
Or
lot,
64, yeah, yeah, yeah. But
still a ton.
I mean,
But
there is. I know the NBA has so much money, and like that in the NFL. I know both those sports and baseball actually. They're really the only pro
yeah,
sport in America that doesn't is the NHL, where your
yeah,
top players are getting like 10 million per year, which is just crazy to think about. But I don't know. I just think some of these deals really cost teams from having a legit chance at competing. Because
yeah.
I mean, you look at like going back to the Celtics, you just had Grant Williams. They gave him a qualifying offer as a restricted free agent, but
hmm
then the Dallas Mavericks stepped in and wanted to pay him
Like
3 or
12 a
4
year,
year, and yeah,
like
like
54 million at 4 year
yeah, I
or
think
something,
yeah, and
or four
so
for 54.
and the Celtics were realistic. They were like, look, we enjoyed him as a player. He developed under us. He put his heart, like he was another one of those players like Smart, who
Like
really played
smart,
with a lot of heart and soul.
yeah.
He stepped up in certain situations. One game off
hmm
the top of my head,
The
uh, ga-
Bucks,
game
game
7 against the
7.
Bucks last
That man
year,
couldn't miss.
where he
Turner
dropped,
Ray
yeah,
Allen.
he dropped in like 27 points.
It was like all
uh,
threes.
yeah, I mean, but they realized, like, look, he's not an everyday player.
Not a starter.
He fell out of the rotation by the end of the year, and I know that was
Yeah.
maybe the difference in philosophies from Udoka to Missoula, but he fell out of the rotation, and another team wanted him, gave him a contract, and they were like, we're not willing to pay him that. Sorry, you
Yeah.
can have him. We'll take draft picks. Um, so I mean, yeah, I mean, I just think the NBA has a lot of players that probably make a lot more than they deserve. And then I want to talk to you about another big trade that happened.
For
Um,
sure.
I'd say though it was the one that kicked off free agency was Bradley Beal got traded. The
Mm.
Wizards essentially cleared house,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
makes sense because nothing was working out. They didn't really have anything going for them. Let's just start over. Every other team, the Sixers have done it where they blew it up and trust the process, and
Hmm.
and the Spurs are probably the latest example of a team that kind of gave up or blew it up, and now they ended up with Wembanyama. But the Suns went and were able to acquire Bradley Beal from the Wizards. And so now
Hmm.
you've got a team over there that features Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and DeAndre Ayton. No longer do they have Chris Paul. He was shipped to the Clippers or the Warriors. We can talk about that a little later.
Hmm.
But I mean that started or big four, if you will. I mean I don't even know if you can include DeAndre Ayton. Let's say big three: Booker, Beal, and Durant. I feel like that's three guys who bring a lot of the same stuff to the
A lot of the
table,
same stuff. Hmm.
and it's one of those situations where you sit there and you're like, there's only one basketball. Like, they
Yeah.
can all be great shooters, but there's only one basketball. And at the
Yeah.
moment, who's distributing? Because I guess the starting
I
point
guess
guard is
Cameron Payne.
Cameron Payne, which, I
Ugh,
mean,
he's okay.
I would say I'd feel a lot more comfortable with him off the bench. I mean, do you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that obviously on paper fans are going to see that team and be like, oh shit, I'm playing with them in 2K.
Oh, of course.
They're gonna be insane. I'm sure they're gonna be up there as early betting favorites to win the title. But do you really see that panning out over the course of a season and into the playoffs
Yeah.
and stuff?
It's hard to say. Obviously, on paper, the talent is amazing, but like you said, a lot of them are all, especially those top three, are very similar players. Like you said, one basketball. So, I mean, a lot of ego is gonna have to be put aside. Booker and KD average 28 each in their sleep. And then you bring in Bradley Beal, also averages 25. I mean, the problem is yes, on paper they have all this talent, but now they have absolutely no depth. I mean, no depth. Like Cameron Payne, who should be a bench player or even a fringe bench player, is going to be the starter. Aiton, he's going to be probably upset because he's a number one overall talent, but he's there some nights, and then nights where he doesn't play any defense, and he's all they got in terms of big men now. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. They do have Frank Vogel, who his specialty is defense. So, he helped the Lakers become a better defensive team, that old Pacers team. So that he should help in that regard, but it's all going to come down to effort. Are these guys going to want to play defense when all of them are just known for scoring? Even Aiden, he's tall, but this guy can't, you know, joke. He can't guard Joker or any of them.
No.
Or Giannis, but I don't know. We'll see. I wouldn't favor them personally. I think it can work, but they're going to need a lot of guys on these minimum contracts to hit. And the reason it's going to be hard for those guys to hit as role players because, they're minimum contract guys for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think they pushed all their chips into one, it's like the Rams, right? You go all in, you better win it because if you don't, they have no draft picks for the next however many years because they gave up all of it on KD. And then they have no second round picks. It seems like they got a new coach, new owner, so it's a very aggressive style. Kind of reminds me of the Rams, where you win it one year if you can, and then you're going to be probably awful for the next like 3 to 5 years plus. So
Yeah,
we'll
and
see how that
to
works.
I was gonna say to drop a fact on people's heads here, going along with what Vincent was saying about how they essentially have no draft picks.
Yeah,
They next control their own draft pick in I believe 2031. That is
that's nuts.
8 years from now, and
That's
Kevin Durant is mid 30s. He's not playing for another 8 years,
yeah.
especially with his injury history. I mean, I assume Devin Booker, as long as he's healthy, of course, will still be
He'll be
around.
around.
Bradley Beal,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he's getting up there,
Yeah, he's like
um,
31 or 2
and
and
he's got. I
still
mean, he's
okay.
got a lot of wear and tear on him from being literally the only option on the Wizards post John Wall. Um, I I don't know. I think it's like you said, it's very interesting. Could it work? Maybe. Will it? I highly doubt. I think teams such as the Celtics and the Lakers, who I want to get into in a second, and how they've gone about their offseason, I think those teams have made smarter decisions in terms of they still have top tier players in the starting rotation, but they also have bolstered their depth and they've made sure to keep role players around that when a guy like LeBron is going to the bench. Because let's face it, I mean, he's arguably the greatest player of all time. He, when he's healthy, is still able to dominate even right now. But he did have some injury issues this past season. He's probably gonna have to play a little less per night. Probably maybe some more rest games or rest days built in there. But they've got a lot of depth behind him. Whereas the Suns are already tapped. Like they've got nothing on the bench. What happens when Kevin Durant messes up his ankle again? Or, you know, Devin Booker gets a shoulder injury or something like that. I mean, all of a sudden, yeah, those other guys, I guess, will have more chances to get touches with the ball, but they're going to literally have to play 48 minutes a night because you have no one else worthy of coming in and filling in for them. So, Suns, it's an interesting way to go about it, banking on three guys who all basically do the same thing to lead the
Yeah.
way. I understand why they moved on from Chris Paul. It was time. He was making a lot of money,
Yeah.
and I where he ended up actually is pretty interesting. So a lot of people thought Chris Paul was going to be used or was he involved in the Bradley Beal trade and then the
He
Wizards traded him to
was.
Washington
Yep.
or to okay.
Mhm.
So he was so people expected him to be involved in the Bradley Beal trade, which he was, and then everyone was assuming the Wizards are going to work out a buyout for him and then he'll be a free agent, he can sign wherever the hell he wants. Turns out they end up working a trade, which I will 100% say
Didn't see
the
that one coming.
Wizards, I didn't see it coming, but the Wizards won it by far. They were able to trade, what, near 40-year-old Chris Paul to
Yeah.
the Golden State Warriors, and in return, they were able to get a player like Jordan Poole, who some thought was going to be the possible successor to.
They call him the Splash Trio or something. He was
Right,
supposed
and
to be
some
like the
people
next
thought he
Splash Bro.
might be the successor to Steph Curry because obviously he's, I mean, getting up there in age.
Yep.
Warriors end up deciding they want Chris Paul, and so they ship Jordan Poole to Washington. But what do you think of that team now in Golden State? Obviously, they went. They some people thought Draymond might leave in free agency. They end up locking him back in with a 3 or 4 year deal. Um, was it like 4 year, 100 million,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Mm.
And then so obviously you're gonna have a starting lineup where it's, I guess, Chris Paul running point and Steph running shooting guard, and
I don't
uh,
know.
or
I
is
think
Chris Paul
he
gonna come
might
off the
come off the
bench? I
bench.
mean,
I'm thinking, yeah. So that's an interesting trade. I don't think anybody saw Chris Paul going to Golden State. I think
no.
they have like a rivalry. I think everybody saw him just entering the buyout market and him kind of deciding. I thought Boston would have been a nice fit for him if that
Mm-hmm.
ended up happening. Obviously not. So you have a guy with experience. Obviously, one of the greatest point guards ever. He is up there in age though. I think it has to be one of those things where you can only play him maybe like 40 regular season games max, maybe 50, because every single year when it matters, he's just out for the playoffs. Like no matter
Right.
what, it doesn't matter. Like, and this goes back to like 2018 when they had Golden State on the ropes with Harden. Him and Harden, they were up 3-2,
Yep.
and they should have won that, and they ended up blowing it because I think he tore or he hurt his groin again or hamstring or something, and obviously they didn't come through, and Golden State ended up winning that year. But um, I think CP3 is going to bring a different pace to the team. Like he should be able to help those young guys like Kaminga and Moody off the bench. Obviously get them shots. I think the Warriors are still going to be in contention. I mean, obviously when you have a player like Steph, one of the best ever, you're always going to have a chance. But I think they need size. And Chris Paul, Warriors like to play fast, get up and down the court. Chris Paul's totally different. He likes to slow it down, pick and roll. really be methodical and grind out the shot clock, get a good shot. He's a good mid-range shooter, so it'll be interesting to see because you have the way that Steph and Draymond play and Clay is really fast, up tempo, getting off a lot of threes, and then you have CP3 who he loves his big men, getting them easy looks and dishing out dimes and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. I still think they lack size, but I think that starting lineup, I think Chris Paul would come off the bench because I obviously you got Clay, still Steph, those two for sure, and then Wiggins, um, Draymond, and probably Looney is what I would think. That's
Right.
what they're gonna roll.
I was gonna
So
say
we'll
otherwise you'd
see,
have Draymond playing the five.
which he can do, but now I think the NBA is starting to go back to where centers matter again. Like center, or
Mhm.
having a nice big man is important. I mean, obviously, you see Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Embiid. I mean, now you guys got Porzingis, like that
Porzingis,
helps. Like, yeah,
Wembanyama.
I think you need a big guy. Small ball it works, but all the past champions in the past couple years, I mean, the Bucks had plenty of size. Um,
Brooke Lopez, I mean, he was
you know,
fantastic for them.
I mean, they had
And
size. Like all the past winners recently, like the Lakers championship team with Dwight, AD, LeBron, JaVale McGee. Like they had a
yep.
big team too. So we'll see. But Warriors, they always got a chance.
Yeah, and I think another team, speaking of the Lakers, I think that's a good team to move on to next for free agency, and then I think we could probably bounce to the stock talk, if you will.
For sure.
Um, but the Lakers, there was a lot of uncertainty with what they were going to do because people thought Austin Reeves might cost too much for them. I believe Rui Hachimura was a restricted free agent for them.
Yep.
Um, and people were concerned: are they going to be able to field a competitive enough team to keep contending for? I mean, they made it all the way to the Western Finals this past year. Just
They did.
they ran into a Nikola Jokic sized brick wall,
Hmm.
which so did every other team that ended up playing them. But I mean, they were able to keep a lot of the guys that people were worried were going to end up leaving in free agency. They went and added a key contributor from the Miami Heat and Gabe Vincent on a very team friendly 3 year, $33 million deal, which, in my opinion, are the type of deals that need to be given to players like that. Far too often now are we seeing players of that talent and what they bring to a team, and they're getting these 4 year 84, 4 year 64, whatever. They're getting a lot of
Mm,
money, and you're not going to be able to field a competitive team if you're giving a role player that much. So bringing in Gabe Vincent, I think, was huge for them. It was huge for him, obviously, as an undrafted free agent.
for
Um,
sure.
do you see the Lakers with what they were able to put together for their roster going into this season? Do you think they're going to be able to compete at a level where they're back in contention for
Yeah.
the Western Conference Finals and perhaps the NBA Finals?
I think so because, they ended the season going to the Western Conference Finals. Um, it really all comes down to AD because as crazy as to say, I mean, LeBron is as long as he's healthy, he's always pretty consistent. It's really AD. Some nights he shows up and puts up 40 and 20, and some nights he puts up 14 and 8 off bad shooting and maybe a block. But when he's engaged, obviously he has that top 5, top 10 talent. Really comes down to him. Now it is good that they kept, that basically that whole core they got from the draft deadline. Bringing back Rui, who played pretty well. I thought Austin Reeves, I thought they stole him, and like they got like a huge discount. Like for him to get 4 years, 54 million, but somebody like Dylan Brooks get 480, and then Bayan for 200 plus. I mean,
Yeah.
Reeves is the better offense. I mean, Reeves is probably he was really good versus the Grizzlies. He can create his own shot. He can shoot. I really like how he plays with LeBron. He's good. I mean, he's a good player. So they kind of got him on a discount. It seems like I was thinking he was going to get more, but to get him and then Gabe Vincent too, another 3-and-D guy to replace that Schroeder role, that's huge. They brought back D'Lo, which D'Lo was awful versus Denver, but he showed some flash every now and then. So I think they're going to make a run for it again. But they're going to need AD to be the best player on the team, not LeBron. LeBron can be, on any given night in the playoffs, but you're going to need these other role players to continue to be consistent, like a Reeves and a Rui, to take that stress off LeBron because he can't be playing 40 minutes, because the Lakers started awful last year with the Westbrook experiment. They were like 2-10 or something. They were awful. So we'll see. Hopefully they can just scale back LeBron's minutes. Those role players step up, and AD does what he's supposed to be there for. Because when you're a Lakers big man with that type of talent, one championship's not good enough. You got to get more than that. I mean, obviously you got Shaq, Will, Kareem, some of the best players ever, big men ever. So if AD really wants to be in that category, they got to go further than that in the playoffs. So be interesting to see how they do this year, but I think they got a shot.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny that you mentioned like some of the great big men, such as Shaq, who,
Yeah,
which I was feeling like the way they're structuring the team going into this next season, in a lot of ways, it feels like the teams that they had when they had Kobe and Shaq, because they have two stars. In this case, it's LeBron and AD, and then they're just putting a ton of solid role players around them, whether it's they're a shooter or they can play defense or rebound or whatever it is. They're not, there's not like other big name guys. They're not doing what like the Celtics did, where now they've got like three big name players, or what the Suns did, where they have, I guess, technically four big name players. They trust that those two guys are their main players, and that everyone else around them is going to be able to contribute in their own ways. And I think it's interesting because, we don't see a whole lot of that where I feel like they have some of the most depth in the league, and rotational pieces. They have some of the best rotational pieces, and honestly, I mean, I think they did very well this free agency. It could have gone a lot worse. They could have probably gotten to a point where they fell out of playoff contention. Uh, I mean, maybe not just because LeBron's there; he doesn't miss the playoffs. But they wouldn't have been a very. There was chances they could have been a very mid team, if you will. But
oh for sure.
I think they handled free agency perfectly, probably better than expected, and I could definitely see them returning as far as they went. Uh, Obviously, it remains to be seen what if teams are going to be able to figure out Nikola Jokic moving forward, because he just completely
Hmm.
dominated the league this past
Yeah,
season. But
that was nuts.
yeah, I mean, the NBA free agency, obviously, there's so many other moves that we didn't even bring up, with big name players. I mean, like Russell Westbrook going to or staying with the Clippers, signing a team friendly deal. I mean, there was other
Very
moves,
friendly.
um, and we could go on all night about, but I think we will end it there with the NBA talk and transition into talking about some stocks and investing. One of the biggest plays that Vincent actually hit on, and I know this because I keep up with him on Twitter. So, like I said, if stocks, trading, investing, any of that is something you're interested in, you want to learn about, I highly suggest giving this guy a follow, because not only does he just kill it day in and day out, but he really helps educate people on what it takes to do what he does. I think it's very important. But one of the plays that he had is actually a company whose vehicles I've been seeing a lot more frequently,
Yeah.
in even in just the Raleigh area, and I can only imagine in other places it's probably very common. But that would be the electric vehicle company Rivian, which they focus more on like the pickup truck, I guess, type build for their electric vehicles, which personally, compared to the rumored or upcoming Cybertruck from Tesla, this is
Yeah.
the way sexier choice. But yeah, I mean, I want you to talk about that one because it seemed like it just kind of like took off for like 2 days or something like that there, and
Yeah.
you really were on time with it.
Yeah. That was, I think Rivian was one of my best plays I've actually ever had in my career, and I did not expect the return to happen this quickly. But anyways, the thought process for taking it long was when I bought it, it was June 27th, and the stock was 13.45. Stock's now 25, and it's an 85% increase in like literally like 2 weeks time. But anyways, the thought process behind it is like you said. One of the best things I've ever heard from a trader or investor, or especially investor, is invest in companies that you believe in, or things that you see every single day. So for us to be talking and just seeing Rivians every single day, I mean, because I would go to the gym, I'd see one or two. I'd just be driving home and see one or two. And this is North Carolina. I can't even imagine with like California and all these other more environmental friendly, or just have more EVs out there, compared to like a North Carolina. But that just goes to show the growth of this company. So that was kind of my thought process behind taking shares on it as like a long-term investment, because their growth, they just had their deliveries, they beat on that. Um, and where the stock was trading at valuation wise, the market cap at the time, um, this is how you can like kind of gauge like what a company is worth. But the market cap of Rivian was like 14 billion. And for context, the amount of cash they had is 12 billion. So like just their assets alone, like that doesn't include obviously there's so many other metrics and stuff, but that alone kind of had me intrigued to it. And then when I see, to give me conviction, I saw just more and more Rivians. Yeah, I have a neighbor with the Rivian. I've seen him on the road, so that's kind of why I took it, and it ended up playing out really nicely. And usually these companies, they report their deliveries like usually at the first of each month, or like very early. Um, of each month, or like every other month or something like that. So it came right on time. I added shares at like on June 27th. I think the deliveries came out like a week later, and that just goes to show, if there's a catalyst and the company performs well, you could see a really nice move on the stock, and that sure enough sent the sector. And now it seems like people are really starting to believe, because if there's any indication at all that this could be the next Tesla, I mean, everybody's going to want to go in on that, because Tesla has changed lives for some people in terms of investments and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens, but I think the future of the company's bright, so I'm happy to have a part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think what you were saying there with like people, almost having that FOMO from not maybe
Yeah.
getting in on Tesla early on and seeing how that stock has performed. Uh, I think people need to realize that, obviously Tesla is the first big electric vehicle company, and they're unique in their own sense because of, I mean, Elon Musk being the CEO and all the other different types of things that he's involved in. He's a very influential person. And so there's a big reason why that stock moves the way it does outside of just how the company itself performs. Uh, but the thing to take into consideration is there's going to be other electric vehicle companies that come out and maybe find their own niche within that. And in this case, Rivian, like I said, is very much more focused towards like the pickup truck style, which Tesla at the moment does not sell a pickup truck to my knowledge. So they came in and, like you said, they did very well on their was it deliveries.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so I mean,
Deliveries.
yep. And so I mean, there's gonna be. I'm not saying every electric vehicle company that comes out is gonna be the next Tesla by any means. Obviously, Rivian's not even close to it, but there's gonna be other ones out there. It's still very much a developing market, uh, and it's just gonna keep growing. And another sector that I wanted to talk about with you that I had a decent. I mean, I'm a long term investor. I don't do the same thing as Vincent, where he does a lot of swing trading, options trading, stuff like that. Um, I am definitely more in the long term stuff, and I recently decided to invest in Carnival, the cruise line stock, and
Heck yeah.
that and just the travel sector in general has really started to ramp back up, which, let's face it, they really only took a massive hit because of, like a lot of other things too, COVID messed up their finances, messed up their market. I mean, no one was going on cruises for like 2 years, or even when they were, it
Right.
wasn't like the typical experience. And now that we're essentially past COVID and the restrictions that came with it and whatnot, cruise lines and other travel stocks are really starting to see an uptick. And
Definitely.
I definitely think that it's a sector that it's not too late to continue to invest in. I mean, you look at some of those stocks, Carnival, for example, pre COVID, they were like in the $50, $60 range, I want to say, on average per share. And right now, I think it's like 16, 17. Uh, so it's still pretty early if you think that it will one day eventually get back to pre-COVID numbers.
That's
But is there
true.
any other stocks that you saw? I mean, obviously there's tons of other cruise lines, you know, airlines and hotels and all that out there that could be in the travel sector. But is there any other ones you
Yeah.
saw a similar movement with?
Yeah, well, I agree with your stance. I think travel, I know the sector well just because when I first started trading, this was like the sector I was always involved with. Obviously, if you use the product, we like to go on a cruise like once a year or so, it makes you want to trade that stock more so you're familiar with it. But just for reference, I mean, uh, Carnival, I'm just looking at its chart. I think last summer it was, trying to see. Because last summer, Royal Caribbean was like $38, and I remember I went on a cruise with my dad, and it would the ship we were talking about, it was kind of like Rivian. We were talking about in person. We were like, why is the stock trading so cheap? I mean, it's close to max occupation again. I think it was like 90%. This was a year ago. Obviously, COVID has definitely come to a close at this point. A lot of people are putting that chapter past in their lives, for the most part. But and now you see, Royal Caribbean is now $102 stock, and that just goes to show. This is another example. It's kind of like Rivian, where you gotta if you see something you believe in person and maybe the market's not catching up to it yet, that could be definitely the sign for a long-term buy or whatever. And for me, I'm thinking to myself, I totally missed the travel boat. I mean, I do have exposure to Southwest Airlines, but I think the cruise line, I mean, I think you nailed that one. I think there's still plenty of upside. They just had earnings carnival and the stock it sold the news a little bit, but it bought right back up. Shares already back to 19 plus. So I think the travel sector's got a lot of room for growth. All of these, everybody's traveling. I mean, who doesn't want to around this time? But in terms of like other sectors to look out for, obviously the market as a whole, it's been kind of by the dip until proven otherwise for the past 3, 4, 5 months, really this whole year, actually, it feels like. So definitely a little change, but we'll see. I think this week we have bank earnings, and that's big because the S&P 500 are one of the biggest sectors on top of technology, healthcare, and things like that. So we'll see what happens with banks. Um, and I'm just watching a variety of stocks. I still have to go through some, but um, it's definitely one of those times right now where, as an investor, you can kind of feel comfortable buying the dip until proven otherwise because that's just how this market's been trading. And now you can kind of see it. Maybe like panic buying is coming in. I mean, you have stocks like Rivian having, you know, massive moves. Carnival, crazy move looking at his chart. So we'll see if this continues. Obviously, you don't want to chase or buy the top. If you're a long term investor, maybe dollar cost average. Um, but yeah, just the overall market's looking nice for for a lot of long-term holders.
I was gonna say, yeah, for sure. And I guess we can end just. I know you said banks have their earnings coming up this week, so that's probably one that you're going to be paying a lot of attention to. Are there any in particular that stick out to you more than some of the others? For example, obviously, there's so many options. You got Bank of America, you got SoFi. I mean, tons of others as
Yeah,
well. But
yeah. I mean, banks are definitely going to be something to watch for. You know, really, this is huge because banks. Earlier in the year, I believe it was March, there was this banking crisis where a couple regional banks went downhill, like they went under. And I think a reason for that was because of the interest rate hikes. A lot of these banks, from what I've heard, the smaller ones, the regional ones, were not leveraged properly, basically with the money that they've taken from deposits of people who use that bank, they just weren't managing it correctly, and the high interest rate increases caused these companies to go under, which scared the whole entire sector. A lot of people now, actually, myself included, were trying to get my money out of the bank and rather have it working in something that's generating some kind of interest, whether it's high yield savings account, dividend stocks, long term stocks. Because most people don't know, but if you're just saving your cash, That could be a good and bad thing at the same time, just because your money is going to depreciate, with obviously inflation and just things like that. So, in terms of banks, what I'm watching for, I think I can go ahead and look and see who we have. We have Citibank, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan. Those would be three big watches this week. Um, Probably JP Morgan's going to be the biggest one, JP Morgan Chase. Um, Citibank I know is another one too. I believe Warren Buffett has Citibank in his portfolio, so we'll see how these perform. The bank sector as a whole this year really hasn't done much. I mean, it's been in a little bit of a range, especially after that crisis it had in March. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see. I can't say I have a top watch, but I know J.P. Morgan last time had a huge earnings beat, and the stock gapped up from 128 to 139. So it's like
Mm,
it's a big move for a large cap like that.
yeah.
Um, so we'll see what's going to happen this week.
Yeah, and I think the thing you said, I know you were kind of giving a little bit of, what do you call it, like financial advice, and here I'll put the disclaimer: don't take us like we're professionals. You do what you want. We just are offering our opinions and suggestions based on our own personal experiences. But I think like what you said about the whole, trying to find different places to put your money aside from just simply saving it. Like I think that's something I just really wanted to touch on. I guess as a closing point. Um, I think Vincent's 100% correct with that like philosophy, that thought process. Because he's right. If you just every dollar you get, you're just saving, saving, saving. It's not going to keep up with the times. It's not going to keep up with inflation, and essentially, it's just going to depreciate. So, finding something like a Roth IRA, 401k, if you get that through work, or even just a high interest savings account, finding one with a different bank, maybe, because some of the bigger banks that have like brick and mortar stores don't necessarily give the best interest rates because they obviously have a lot of expenses. I personally bank with Ally, which is all online, and they have pretty decent. What do you call it? They pay pretty good interest for their savings, but obviously it's important to always have money set aside for emergencies or anything that you know you're going to be doing like on an annual basis. For example, my wife and I always set aside a certain amount for vacations. We set aside a certain amount for uh, car emergencies. I just had to friggin' get my brake pads changed out. That was a wonderful $900. But if you're not ready for it, it sucks. Like if you're living paycheck to paycheck or you just don't set aside money for things, all of a sudden, a $900 expense, you're like, what the fuck? But when you
Yeah,
have the money set aside, and even if it's not 100% of it, even if it's maybe just 6 or 700 at that point set aside, now it's not so much coming out of your checkings account, coming out of your pocket directly, if you will. Uh, and so it's always important to have savings. Don't get me wrong, and that is not at all what Vincent was trying to take away from. I know he knows that as well. But finding other avenues to invest in, um, it's always a great way to go about it. That's part of what we're talking about on the show. It's one of the three core pillars, if you will, of topics that we discuss. I am definitely more, like I said, hyper focused on long term investing and just general, I guess, financial advice. And Vincent's definitely the person to go to learn about like the more shorter term stuff and trading options and swing trading and just following it on a daily basis and really keeping tabs on things and learning his philosophies on what he sees in different stocks. I mean, it's all important stuff. It's I don't think enough people put value into their personal finances, and so I heavily suggest maybe putting a little more interest into that for yourself. But I think that's a good place to close out. Obviously, we covered a lot of NBA. We covered, uh, like I said, you're arguably one of your best trades of all time there, and just some sectors that we're looking out for. There wasn't really a whole lot to get into on the gaming side of things, and like I've said before, we're not gonna force a certain topic if there's not much to discuss. But that I mean that's gonna close it out for episode 3 of Got Your Trade. We will be back. I want to say, Vincent, you're going on a trip for like 2 weeks coming up, right?
Yeah, but I could do something possibly. I'll have like my laptop, iPad, so
Okay.
we'll figure it
We'll
out.
figure
But
it out. But yeah, we're definitely trying to stay consistent with it. I know that like we went like episode and then we did another one a week after and there's a little gap here. But just like I said, just bear with us. We're just figuring out our schedules. We both enjoy the hell out of this. Every single time we end the show, we're like, that was awesome because we're literally just
yeah,
having conversations that we'd be having in general. But for those of you that watched here live, we really appreciate you. If you don't already, make sure to follow me here on Kick at PescaroDB. Of course, you can follow all our socials. I have those posted down there. But anything you want to close out with, Vincent?
for sure. Just want to say thanks to anybody who's tuned in, whether you're only here for a few minutes or watching the whole thing, means a lot. As always, if you guys ever have any questions for us, hit us up through the DMs. Maybe we'll cover in the next episode. But Drew, I enjoyed this one. It's always a pleasure talking basketball, any type of sport, us and stock stuff. So I enjoyed it and looking forward to you guys in the next episode.
Of course. And so, whether you watched it live, whether you're catching it on YouTube after we upload it to there, like we said, we appreciate you watching it, whether it's for a little bit, watching the whole thing, it means the world to us. And until next time, we'll catch you in the next episode of Got Your Trade.